on here in just a second. Now, we're going to talk about a wedding. No surprise. I mean, anybody's read the book of Ruth knows it's about a wedding. And so here comes the bride, and is what we're going to be looking at. There are some unusual customs for weddings around the world. I don't necessarily endorse these customs. They're just customs. It's how people do weddings in different countries. In Japan, they come together either based on a love match or through an arranged marriage. Depends on how traditional the Japanese family is. The ceremony itself is an elaborate celebration, an extravagant affair. In modern-day Japan, it's a combination of a Western-style wedding and a Shinto wedding. For some reason they do both. It's kind of a I can't even say the word, but it means where they try to mix everything together. That doesn't work, by the way, when you're talking about religion, so just so you understand that. But they try to sort of toss in some of that Western style that's there. They have it completely at one, like a Shinto shrine that's located in a hotel where the entire festivities take place. The bride is often painted in white from head to toe, symbolizing her virginity, wears a kimono and a wig, and has a choice of two headdresses. Either a white hood, and there's a word that I can't pronounce, it's almost like tsunami, tsutsuki, and it covers the horns of jealousy. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but I guess that it somehow covers so she's not supposed to be jealous, maybe. It's also a symbol of her obedience. The Shinto priest conducts a ceremony, has several parts that require the bride to change kimonos, and 3 different times, I guess they do. And then important parts of it, there's a go-between, there's the drinking of the nuptial cups of sake, ceremonial lighting of a candle, and then the religious ceremony. The couple has to be married by signing civil documents. The Maasai in Africa, really the wedding starts long before the wedding day. It's not really surprising. The courtship and marriage are drawn out. Divorce is not an option. It doesn't happen in the Maasai. And what happens, a young man who takes an interest in a girl, he gives her a chain. Sometimes, boy, that's just strange, man. I'm trying to get that in my head, you know, walking up to Sandy going, honey, I love you, I'd like to marry you. Here's your chain. Yeah, I don't know. That seems like a dead wish to me, but that's how the Maasai do it. They give her a chain, and then sometime later, he assembles several of the women of his own age, to bring the future mother-in-law a drink of alcohol. Don't endorse it, just saying that's how they do it. And again, sometime later, a drink of alcohol to bring to his future father-in-law, who drinks it and asks the young man to make his intentions clear. This stage passed, he then is allowed to bring the family the future wife gifts, which accumulated and represent the wife's dowry. Finally, the wedding day arrives. The groom brings the bride's price, 3 cows, all black, 2 sheep. The male sheep is slaughtered. Its fat is used on the bride's head. And the wedding dress, and her head is shaved, the fat is applied. She then puts on her wedding dress, a beautiful bead of decorations, and is led from her house, they call it kraal, and K-R-A-A-L, and her husband's, where she spends the next 2 days in the house of her mother-in-law. After that, her head is shaved again, and finally the bride and groom live as husband and wife. That's how they do it. In India, they have pretty elaborate celebrations. They're joining together. Really, in India, they see it as being 2 families that are joined together, and so it's a very sort of social thing. The bride and groom come, and there's a ceremony of purification where the 7 unmarried females apply paste made from sandalwood, turmeric, rose water to the couple's face, hands, and feet. They're not allowed to leave home until the actual wedding day. The exchange vows is a crucial part. The bride sits on the right side of the groom until the vows are made. Then she moves to the left, because the right side is for acquaintances, and then the left is for somebody that you love and you trust, and they make that switch over to that side. And after he's made a long list of promises to care for and look after his wife. In one section of India, the groom wears a veil. It isn't a bride. The groom wears a veil, and he rides in on a horseback, and given that the weddings are highly social affairs, it often happens that hundreds or even thousands of guests appear, many of whom can even be unknown to the couple. They just show up because it's a party, I guess. And then in America, a Las Vegas wedding may be the quickest and least ceremonial way to tie the knot. All you need is a license, and then you're spoiled by your choice of hundreds of wedding chapels and companies that can arrange gazebo weddings, theme weddings, even underwater weddings, or for those who are really in a hurry, drive-through weddings. Oh, it makes you proud to be an American, doesn't it? Marriage is the first institution given for the welfare of the human race, and marriage it's the foundation of our society. It's crucial, and really Ruth in this 4th chapter you find a wedding taking place here, and it has an unusual ceremony. I've never seen this happen. It's a giving of a sandal from one person to another, and it's kind of how this wedding takes place. But it's just fascinating. Let's jump in here, starting in verse 1 and verse 2. And then went Boaz up to the gate and set him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside and sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And so what's going on is the nearer Kinsman Redeemer is going to be given his chance to turn down this property and Ruth. And Boaz, as Naomi rightly predicted in the 3rd chapter, Boaz is a man of action. He shines through this book as an incredibly man of integrity and a man of action. He's apparently a successful businessman, and he shines through as somebody that is of sterling character. And he knows the right way to do a thing. He's not going to somehow, go pretend like there's not another Kinsman Redeemer and kind of hope nobody notices. He does everything above board, up front, and wants to let this other man know that there is this situation, and he's the nearer kinsman and has the right of redemption first. He can perform the duty of a goel and redeem this property if he chooses to. And so he gets the situation set up. Now, they go to the city gate. That would have been in the cities of Judea and Israel. That would have been kind of the place of power. It would have been kind of the city council. It would have been the court. It would have been kind of all those things sort of mixed into one. It was the center of influence. All the men of influence would have come and sat in the city gate. That's why it's disturbing that Lot sat in the city gate of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sitting in the city gate of Sodom means that you're a man of influence there. And so with these corrupt, wicked people, Lot, I think, had been so sort of absorbed into the culture that he even rose to power among them. That's not good, But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But that's what's going on here. Is they go to the city gate, and he sees the man and brings him over, says, sit down, and he brings the other elders that are there to be witnesses, and then also to kind of just to know what's going on, to see what's going on. There's a little thing that you might not notice. Do you notice that his name, he doesn't use the name of the other guy? It says in the King James, it says, it set him down, behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spoke, and came by, and he said unto him, Ho, such a one. In the Hebrew, it really has this idea of Mr. So-and-so. They don't really, in other words, it intentionally leaves his name out. Now, why does it do that? Does anybody have any guess why they leave the guy's name out? Because he's going to turn Ruth down. And once you turn down this responsibility of being a kinsman redeemer, your name is sort of intentionally forgotten. It's left off because you didn't step up to this place of responsibility. And so it's kind of a way of shaming an individual who doesn't take their responsibility seriously, and they don't remember his name. Boaz is all through the book. His name is all over it because he is the guy in the book that steps up as the goel or the kinsman redeemer. But it's just a fascinating thing that I had not noted. I've read Ruth a bunch of times, but I've not noticed that it intentionally left his name out, doesn't remember it, and it uses shame to try to bring about right behavior. I know there's all kind of sort of psychology today, and like, yeah, you shouldn't shame people. Look, whatever happened to shame? Shame is a good thing. Everybody, you notice in society, nobody's ashamed of anything now. I mean, you can commit the worst kind of horrendous things, and people will just swagger about it. I mean, it's not even that they're not repentant, it's they actually have a sort of an extra kick in their step because they've done these wicked, horrible things, and they somehow want to be applauded or patted on the back or felt sorry for or whatever it is. But in the Bible, shame was one of the ways that God used to motivate people to do right things. If you've ever met a mom, moms use shame to motivate kids to do right things. I use shame to motivate my children at times to do right things. And God uses shame. You should be ashamed of yourself. Every once in a while, I'll tell my kids, your last name's Kissinger. I'd like you to live up to your last name. I don't want people thinking that's the normal way that we do things. And so, and in a similar way, I am called a Christian. I should live up to that name. And so it should be a shame if I do something that's anti-Christian, unchristian. You see what I'm saying? And it's just fascinating that I'd not noted it before. Verse 3 and verse 4. And Boaz, he then asked the kinsman redeemer to redeem the land of Naomi and Elimelech. And he said unto the kinsman, in verse 3, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech, our relative, is what he's saying. He says, and I thought to advise thee, saying, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. Now instantly he says, Naomi, in other words, Naomi has this land that is in peril right now, and it needs to be brought back into the family unit. And we mentioned it last week, so we'll go over it a lot. But in the dividing up of the land in Joshua, it was divided in tribes and then divided among family units. And within the family units, it really couldn't be permanently lost unless there was a total cutting off of the descendants that were there, because it would come back to them every year of Jubilee. But 50 years is essentially a lifetime of somebody, and if somebody doesn't redeem this land in Naomi's lifetime, by the time the 50 years comes around, she won't have any benefit of it, and really it's lost to that family, and the productivity of that family for that 5-decade period of time. That's a long time. And so this principle of kinsman redeemer was then brought about so that that land could stay in perpetuity to God's people, and then even in the specific tribes and the specific families. Now you remember Ahab, when he wanted Naboth's vineyard. You remember why Naboth really couldn't get rid of the vineyard? It was part of that family land that was given him. It would have been convenient for Ahab to have a nice little vineyard outside of his window. It wasn't his territory or property. That's why Naboth didn't want to sell that, is it was a part of this inheritance that was so important to really the Jewish community. It was essential to them, and it still is essential. It was a big deal. And so, and then he offers this. He says, look, Naomi's come back. There's this land that's in peril. You're the next redeemer. What are you going to do about it? And so there's this. Now, and instantly he says, I'll redeem it. Now you can understand where he's coming from. He's going to redeem it. It's going to be good for him. He'll be the guy that's in control of this property. He'll be able to use that land to farm on, and then whatever crops he sells off of it. This is an instant way to make more money for him. He'll buy the land. It's going to cost him something up front. He'll buy it back, but he'll be able to use it, and it'll be a part of his family structure as well as Naomi's family structure. This is financially way beneficial to him. And he said, yeah, I'll do it. Because there's potential that's there. There's possibility that's there. But you know what? With every privilege, there's also a corresponding responsibility. And a lot of people are all over the privilege, man. I want privilege. I like privilege. But we don't always want the responsibility that comes along with the privilege that's there. In the olden days of kings and queens, they had a principle called noblige oblige, and it meant the obligation of nobility. And how it was set up, if you had been given nobility, if you had been born into a noble family, you had an obligation to the people that were under you, that you had authority over, and if you didn't treat them right, they were in fear that God would judge you if you didn't treat them right, and that was exactly the right understanding. And so we have, whenever God brings a possibility into our life, a privilege into our life, we need to understand there's a corresponding responsibility that follows along with that. So he's like, I'll redeem it. I'll do it. And then he's going to bring up, Boaz will then bring up the corresponding responsibility. Look at verse 5. Then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou shalt buy also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon the inheritance. Different picture here now. This is getting a little more complicated than this guy wants to tackle, and here's why. With Naomi, this is not really a problem, okay? If it's just Naomi, she's past childbearing years. And so even if he makes her ceremonially a wife to himself and brings her home, he's not going to raise up any children by her. She's already said in chapter 1, she's too old to have children, to Ruth and to Orpah, so that she can't give them any baby boys to raise up, even if they wanted to wait to marry him. She says, I'm beyond all that. And so with Naomi, he's not going to have to, when the inheritance comes time, and he would give the inheritance to his children, they would get Naomi's land, would go to them. Do you follow what he's thinking? But now, once you bring Ruth into the picture, because she's really the one, once Elimelech died, it went to his sons. His sons died, and now Ruth is the big part of this equation, and she's the one that's going to have to be married, not Naomi. Because the inheritance went down to her through the husband, and so he's got to marry her, and it's going to be a different deal if he marries her. She's going to have kids, and then his maybe adult children are going to, who maybe he's even already divided some inheritance with them, like the prodigal son, but had got his inheritance. Maybe that's already done. It's going to muddy the waters for him. It's like, I don't know. And you might want to even add on to that, just to toss in a little thought. Can you imagine? Okay. So your husband, you come home and you bring Naomi. Okay, Naomi's grandmotherly. She's a grandmotherly lady. Maybe she, and you say, I'm the Kinsmen Redeemer. I have to marry her. It's the law. I've got to marry Naomi, and so she's going to come. She's going to live with us. She's going to be my second wife. She's grandmother. Ruth is hubba purdy. Okay, and so you come home, and you bring Ruth with you. A stunning woman comes into your house, and you say, I gotta marry her. You're like, no, I don't think you do. I don't think you have to marry her. It's gonna get complicated, friend. This now, everything is different for him about this responsibility issue. All of a sudden, there's obligation to it that he wasn't willing to pay that price. And so he says no. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. And just makes a pretty quick mental calculation and goes, no, that's not going to happen. You do it. And it just shows you something about Boaz's character. He was going to take Naomi and Ruth in, get the land, raise up children by her, and that property was going to go down to him. This is going to cost him almost every way. And he's willing to do it. The other guy's not willing to do it. We need to be willing to do what other people are not willing to do. As believers, one of the things, if we're going to grow in disciples of Jesus Christ, we have to do what other people are not willing to do. Because look, you know what happens? I worry about every time I pray with somebody, I worry that they just want salvation, but they don't want to grow in their walk with God. Do you understand what I mean? I worry about it. It frets me. I told Pastor Jesse I prayed with a couple there last week, and I did a wedding for them, and they prayed, and the man had tears in his eyes. I always go to the plan of salvation before I do marriage counseling, and they prayed, but they don't live in this town, and I worry for them. I said, you got to get into a good church. You have to, but I don't know if they will, and I worry about that because there's a lot of people they want heaven, but they don't necessarily want to be a disciple. They don't necessarily want to follow Jesus. They want to take up their cross and follow Him. They don't want to do what other people are not willing to do. We need to be more like Boaz and less like us, where we're willing to do something, even if it costs us, we're willing to do it. Maybe especially if it costs us, we're willing to do it because God has given us everything. How can we give back to God less than everything if God's given us everything? If God shovels blessing on me, I've been blessed more than you can possibly imagine. On Saturday, I will have been married 28 years. 28 years with my wife. That staggers me that she would stay with me that long. Maybe she's not thinking clearly, but I've had a wife for 28 years, and if you knew what a nerd I am, she has to live with my weird sense of humor and, a quirkiness and 1,000 things, and she stayed with me. I have 7 children. I've been blessed by, I have a fantastic church that I love. My brother, Pray that God opens up. My brother's put in for a job over in Twin Falls, Norman, out in Missouri. He's put in for a job. It's a counseling job, and it closes on August the 6th. And I really, really want him to move out here. And he called me. He goes, "Now you're not planning on going anywhere else, are you?" And I said, "Well, I said, really, I'm not. If God told me to go somewhere else, and I knew that that's what God wanted me to do, I would. But I don't feel led to do that. I believe God wants me to be here." And he goes, "Good, because he said, I'm thinking about moving there, and I don't want to go there if you're going somewhere else." And so anyway, but he just prayed about that God will open up that door. But really, God blessed me. I have all you guys. I have a church family that's enormous, and I love that. It's exciting. But with those obligations, with those privileges, is responsibility. We need to remember that. Let's go to verse 6. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. And then redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. We kind of covered that already. And then the ceremony to document the proceedings. Look at verse 7 and 8. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming, concerning changing. For so to confirm things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor. And this was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said to Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. This goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 25, and it really this was set up. Probably what it meant was this. The best that I can understand from a lot of the commentators, it kind of makes sense. We sign documents. You know, like if we're going to do... This is the first house I've ever bought. The only house I've ever bought is over here at 501 East Avenue High. When I signed the papers for the house, I almost got writer's cramp. Do you guys remember when you signed on your house? You have to sign like a gazillion documents. I mean, you signed this, and I mean, I don't really even know what I signed. I mean, the people shoved paper at me and said, well, this is this, blah, blah, blah. And it had so much lawyer print on it, you could have never read it. It had taken you 3 weeks to read the stuff they gave you. I might have signed over my firstborn child to them. I have no idea. But I signed all the papers, and that's how you do it. In America, that's how you do it. Then, apparently, and even that was something that maybe had fallen into disuse by the time that they were actually put this down in writing, but it was talking about how what you would do is you would take off a shoe, and that had to do with the transaction of property. And why it did was, remember when God, I know you don't personally remember, but I mean, remember when God gave Abraham the land, he had him walk over, right? Mm-hmm. And walk over the whole land. And a lot of times, if you're doing even a smaller transaction, the way that you would measure it is you'd step it off, you know, to measure. So you're going to be given this amount of land, and the parties would step things off, and that's how they would measure. You didn't have like laser stuff or whatever to do that, and that's kind of typically how it was done. And so the shoe represented you taking possession of something. It represented the measuring off of that so that you could take possession of it. And so it was kind of representative of that land transaction that was there. And so the man took off his shoe and gave it to Boaz, and it was a representation of, you're the one that's going to redeem this land. This is yours to walk on, to claim, to own. You know, and so that's just a fascinating thing that was there. But it seems like it's also part of a wedding ceremony because of what comes on next. And listen to verse 9. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have brought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife. Doesn't mean he bought her, but I mean, you understand that it's a part of this Kinsmen Redeemer thing. Purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, and the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. And it's fascinating, there was another part of this ceremony. If the Kinsman Redeemer turned it down so that he doesn't want the shoe or whatever, he doesn't want to, she spit on his face, man. But now there wasn't dishonor in this, so she doesn't spit on him. This was just apparently the transaction of the property, and so Ruth doesn't feel slighted by this, so she doesn't spit on him. But that's what they did. No kidding. So just a strange thing that you find out when you study the Word. All kinds of exciting things come to the forefront. I'm not reading that to my kids, man. I don't want them to know. You will not. I will spank the fire out of you. And now Ruth, it's fascinating about Ruth. I want you to think about this. Think about this. Remember in Ruth chapter 1. Ruth chapter 1, it looks like to everybody, I mean everybody that's reading Ruth, never read it before, it looks like Ruth has given up any possibility of finding a mate for her life. That's what Naomi's big concern was with Ruth coming with her. She said, how are you gonna find a husband? You're gonna come to this little tiny place called Bethlehem, where you're a stranger here, you're a Moabite woman here, and you're gonna come into Bethlehem. How are you ever gonna find a husband? If you want to find a husband, you better stay in Moab. Remember that was the argument that she was making in Ruth chapter 1? Is you got to stay there. What Ruth did is she put her trust in God. She said, I'm going to follow God. I'm going to be, your people are my people. Your God is my God. I'm going to follow your God. And when she was following her God, God brought a husband to her. That's a good principle, I think, if you're single and you're maybe struggling with this idea of, of who am I going to be with? Trust God to bring you the right person. Don't you find that sometimes what happens is we manipulate situations? We try to manipulate, we try to make this thing, you know, it's gotta work this way, and it's gotta be in this time frame. And I think sometimes we get so focused on that maybe we miss the very person that God's brought to us. You know, and so it's just something to think about. And it's fascinating that Ruth trusted God, and as a result of that, God brought her the perfect person that was to her saving, and also the saving really of Naomi. And he says, "You're witnesses this day." It's not only the transaction of the property, but I think there's a wedding going on, and there's witnesses that are here. Just like in a wedding, when I did the wedding last Friday, when I did the wedding, there's witnesses signed. I always tease them when they sign the document. It was out at the Ag Museum that's out here by Petro. Well, it used to be Petro, Flying J, I think it is now. And it was there. It's blistering hot, man. I got there an hour early. I was but anyway, we did it, and then at the end of it, I had them sign. I always tease the people that are signing. You just signed over all your earthly possessions to the new couple. And they're like, what? But really, there's always witnesses at a wedding, and there's even a civil element to a wedding where the state recognizes even that there's this wedding. And I run into people all the time. Right now, the big deal is we're going to live together. You know, we're gonna shack up and we'll live together, and we're gonna try it before we buy it or something kind of deal. Look, that is sinful and wicked and wrong. And I don't even know other way to say it. I had a guy said, I went to visit him. He come to church, and I went to visit him, and he said I almost got up and came up and hit you. And I said, well, why did you do that? And he goes, what you said, what you called, it wasn't his wife. Apparently he was living with the lady, and I didn't know that he was living with her. I mean, I didn't know nothing about their situation. But I preached on fornication that morning, and I hit on that, and I guess I hit on it pretty hard. And he said he wanted to get up and come up and punch me, and I went, wow. And I said, well, really, you don't have a problem with me, you have a problem with God. And I showed him the verse again and read it to him again about, you know, it's the word of God that you abstain from fornication, that you don't live together outside of the bounds of marriage. And I explained that's what it says. That's exactly what it means. God said it. I didn't make it up. It wasn't something that just kind of came into my mind. I thought, hey, I think I'll say this. You know, it's part of the Bible, and I've got to tell you what the Bible says. And well, he didn't hit me, but he didn't change. You know, I left, and I left with all my body parts intact. But look, these people all the time, they come up and they go, well, you know, I don't think you need to do that. I mean, I love her, and I'm gonna live with her, and I just want, my love is just as deep as your love. And I'm thinking, that's really weird, man. What kind of love would try to hide from commitment? You know, so you really love a woman, you're gonna hide from commitment. I love you, but I'm not gonna marry you. No sirree, there's not gonna be no marriage for me, but well, I love you with an undying kind of commitment, but I'm not gonna marry you. That, to me, that's nonsense. Or it's a kind of love that's almost like an undercover love. I don't want anybody to know I'm married to you. You know, I'm not going to wear no ring on my finger and let people know that we're actually together. Oh, this is my friend Denise, or my friend somebody, blah, blah, blah. You know, look, marry him. Do the right thing. Don't play house and pretend. Every once in a while I get this. Maybe you guys that counsel with people, maybe you get this too. What if we were on a desert island? It was just the two of us. Would we have to not be married? And I'm like, okay, look, if you're ever on a desert island, just you and the woman, and there's nobody else, then maybe you can have a little ceremony all by yourself. But until then, go ahead and get married, because you're not on a desert island. I mean, to listen to these guys talk, you'd think that if you went out to the Aleutian Islands or went down into these little islands down in the Caribbean, you'd find all these little deserted islands with little coconut trees and little couples that were there shacking up because they can. Come on. That's stupid. And do you understand? But that's how they think. And it's this binding up that's there that's just insane. I love Sandy. So on August the 4th, 1984, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I married her. I committed my life to her. The most romantic thing is not Romeo and Juliet. The most romantic thing is Grandma and Grandpa holding hands. That's what's romantic to me. I love to see that. That thrills my heart to see an older couple. Now, sometimes I've seen older couples that look like they was too happy to be with one another. That's not what I want. I want to be an older couple that actually enjoys being with my wife, and my wife enjoys being with me. So I understand when the husband first retires, that can be a little bit tenuous because they're there all the time. But I'm talking about you settling into some comfortable. Yeah, everybody looked at Tom right then. Why was that? Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. Look, we want to love one another, you know? I mean, and love our mates, and be proud to be married. Look at verse 11. And all the people that were in the gate, the elders said, we are witnesses. And the Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Epaphroditus, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez and Tamar, whom Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Man, there's just a marriage blessing that's there over this young couple, and that God would make them fruitful. And it's the blessing of these witnesses that were there that sort of signed off on this wedding as they noted this couple uniting their lives together. The crowd cheers, and the men thought Ruth was beautiful, and the women thought Boaz was handsome, and everybody could see this romantic moment in the making. It's a beautiful thing, this wedding. I still love weddings. I mean, I get to participate in a lot of weddings, and it's exciting. I love to see that moment when the groom sees the bride, and sees her come in that back door, you know, and comes in, and she's radiant, and it's just exciting for me to be a part of the uniting of two lives together with God's blessing on it. That is somehow supernatural, and it's exciting. And these guys were excited, and they just spontaneously are talking about these blessings that are on them, asking for fruitfulness. Like, do you know what? You understand what they're saying? They're saying, boy, we hope you guys have a dozen kids. That's kind of it. Every once in a while, when I'll tease people, the ladies here at church, I'll say, they'll do something, and I'll say, may your tribe increase. And the ladies, they're like, no! Don't say that. But really, that's what they're saying to them. They're saying, may your tribe increase. May you have a dozen kids. And the Pharez comment, doesn't that seem strange that they talk about Pharez? Pharez is a guy that you're introduced to in the book of Genesis 38. And there's some twins that are born, and he kind of comes out first. And he seems to be struggling to come out first. And he's apparently part of the tribe of Judah, and a part even that ends up... his family, he's sort of the head of one of the main families of Judah, apparently from this area where Bethlehem is. And so what it seems to me that they're saying by talking about him is this, is may the birthright and the blessing be yours. The birthright and the blessing be yours. Man, you and I have an excellent birthright. We are sons and daughters of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That is exciting. God has made us a kingdom of priests, kings and priests. Wow, that's nobility. God has made you nobility. I bet you never thought of yourself as nobility before. I've never had anybody accuse me of being nobility, and yet in the spirit realm, I am nobility. You are as well. You're a son or daughter of the High King. That is an amazing thing. You have privilege and you have responsibility that's been granted to you by the Kinsmen Redeemer that brought you into his family. There is that privilege and responsibility that you have. And then, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. God blessed their union together. Gave him a little baby. And Ruth, and Naomi kind of even gets in on the joy of being grandma again, a grandma here, in verse 14. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, and that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. And for thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom, and she became nurse unto it. In other words, they couldn't pry the baby out of Naomi's hands. And it's kind of what I take of it is that she's holding this baby, beautiful little grandbaby that God gave her, and it was a part of the sign of what God had done for Naomi, about the redemption that had taken place as a result of this Kinsman Redeemer. Now, note the difference between Naomi now and Naomi then. Go back to chapter 1 and look at verse 20 and 21. Go back to chapter 1 just real quick. We'll not labor on this, but look at it. This is her talking to her daughter-in-laws and how she feels about her future. And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi, but call me Mara, or bitter. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? She's bitter there, man. And she's like, there's no way this can work out. No way. Have you ever felt like that about your future? No way it can work out? You know, God is an expert in no way. And there didn't look like any way, but there was a way. And you only find out at the time that God provides the way. That's the faith of it. Isn't that amazing? And so it's just fascinating to me that she goes from this very bitter, angry woman in the first chapter to this, in my mind, I see her kind of on a, you know, little rocking chair. I don't even know they had rocking chairs then, but I kind of picture the rocking chair. I don't know why. There's something about babies and rocking. If you have a rocking chair or not, you're going to turn a stationary chair into one. And even if you don't, you're going to swing them. When my kids were all babies, I'd swing them like this when I was trying to get them to go to sleep. I'd kind of rock them back and forth. I had that rotation down pretty good. And I wouldn't get dizzy most of the time, but you'd swing them back and forth. I imagine, I've been accused of being dizzy all the time, but I think that's just an overstatement. But I picture her now in this fourth chapter, almost purring. I mean, you know, cats, when they contented, I mean, just almost, whatever it is that makes you contented like that, she's contented. So she went from bitter to contented. And you know, it's a process. She didn't know in chapter 1 she was going to ever be contented again. If you'd have asked her, if you'd have made her lay money down on it, she'd have bet money, I'm never going to be happy again. There's never going to be another good day in my life. Everything broke against me. My husband's dead. My sons are dead. Everything's gone. I don't have anything to live for, God. Why me? Okay. Need a diaper change? Ruth! Let's stand closing prayer. Mighty Jesus, we thank you for this day. What an awesome God you are. Thank you for being our kinsman redeemer. Thank you for enfolding us into your forever family by your work on the cross. Thank you that you didn't send an angel who wasn't a kinsman. Thank you that you didn't send a prophet who couldn't have been a redeemer. Thank you that you are our kinsman redeemer and that you bought us back out of the slavery of sin and that you set us free and you allow us to have an inheritance with you that we don't deserve. You've made us sons and daughters of God. What an awesome God you are. In Jesus' name, amen.
You gotta make more copies, everybody else.
I'll see this.
Yeah,
I'll take them later.
I'll give you this
I'm not playing.
one.
They couldn't get the thing in there.